Thanks, Deputy Speaker. Now, we've heard repeated references to the value of diversity of opinion in this debate and in terms of democracy and the role of media in facilitating diversity of views. And I'd have to say there haven't been too many in this debate, diversity of views. And in me expressing them, I have to make a confession to you, Deputy Speaker. I am either crazy brave or I am just the dumbest politician in Canberra to be able to want to put a number of views that run contrary to the overwhelming commentary that we have had in the media about this. And I think it is important to have some things. It's important to think, and I do not want to be associated with the member for Hughes in doing so, I might add. But I would make this point. In saying these things, the easiest thing for me to do as a member of parliament is to just back in the media on these reforms. Easy. I'll get heaps of coverage and it'll all be good for me, and it'll be pretty much like I've seen a lot of Liberal backbenchers do through the course of this debate, some of which profess to be major supporters of tech, but it would be just the sweetest ride. Oh, it would be so good. But I'm sorry, I'm not built that way, and I've never approached politics in that way. Because from my point of view, I think we need to call out everything in this. And before I do, I just want to acknowledge this. When it comes to technology, I absolutely get there are a number of major issues that need to be dealt with. Tech has, in large part, impacted on media. I get that too. Google specifically revolutionised the way that people could advertise on their platform. Cheap, widespread access for people to see those ads. There has been a lot of work to recognise that the platform and the advertiser, being one and the same company, have a competitive advantage over others. Totally get it, right? So I understand absolutely that, and that's had to be reformed from a competition perspective. There is a serious market power that has been accrued because of the way in which those platforms lever off the network effect, and they bring a lot of consumers and producers together at once, and they just keep growing and growing and growing. And this has generated massive amounts of data that in this day and age, as people have described elsewhere, is the new oil that is making businesses function. And so that data has fuelled a lot of growth in those companies. It's fuelled a concentration of market power, and it has made these big firms continue to grow bigger and bigger and bigger. And with that data come massive privacy issues too. And it's not just going to be on the tech side. There are a lot of businesses now that gather up data and use it in ways that, if the general public knew exactly how it was being used, they'd be deeply concerned. And so privacy reform, another big issue. In terms of competition law, from the point of view of big tech players swallowing up smaller firms that might be potential rivals, that's a big issue as well. ACCC identified it in this landmark report, and there's a lot in that report. I said that was landmark when it was first released, and I still believe it is. There's also a challenge to competition law in an environment where tech actually has a deflationary impact, because a lot of the things that are provided by tech are provided for free, right? So there's a deflationary impact, and those firms don't necessarily immediately benefit from that, whereas competition law is about the impact. If there is a detrimental impact on a consumer, then that's when competition law kicks in. So there's a longer-term reform of competition law that has to happen as well. There's the health impacts of tech addiction too. So there's a lot of things that we need to be able to deal with in the technology space. So I get all that. But do you think for 1 minute a Conservative government would seriously tackle all those issues? No way. They would never reform competition law or undertake any of the things necessary, and I challenge them actually, if they were serious on privacy, to challenge the way in which consumer, the general public's data, and having a benefit for the general citizenry, not as a consumer, but as a citizen, about how data is used. I will wait a long time, and I suspect many members in this place will wait a long time for that to happen. Right? That's that too. The platforms themselves have opened up new ways to express yourself, and I certainly do value, as a parliamentarian, the ability to use social media to reach new audiences. But I've got genuine concerns about the ability of us to be able to have diverse views heard in one of the most concentrated media markets on the planet. We have one of the most concentrated media markets on the planet, and that does impact on diversity of views massively. And that also, if we are told in this debate that these reforms are important, that the tech players have an impact on democracy and the diversity of views and the ability of the media to operate in that environment, then I want a fair income assessment too about the concentration of media in this country that prevents the diversity of views. That's never going to happen from this side of politics. Never, ever is it going to happen from this side of politics. And not for 1 minute do I think this side of politics has got a newfound commitment to transparency and openness. FOI laws, freedom of information laws, run into the ground. Parliamentary question time, run into a joke. The PM flicks more questions to other ministers than answers to himself and won't be accountable. Estimates processes, we have more questions taken on notice than answered, I reckon. Estimates and the transparency that is provided by estimates has been thwarted by this government, and we still don't have a National Integrity Commission 2 years after it was promised. So don't tell me for a minute that this side of politics has suddenly dressed itself up as the champion of democracy, wanting to see diverse views flourish in an open environment. Give me a break. The biggest thing, and the thing I'm most deeply uncomfortable about this entire debate, is the way in which big interests can use competition law in their own interests. It's been the big interests that have driven competition law on this. I mean, the ACCC has never stepped in to deal with the concentration of media in this country. I don't see it. I mean, have they forced any divestment? No. Any time there is a potential merger, the view is largely that it's going to be in the public interest because those media outlets might fall apart. This government certainly hasn't presided over media diversity, quite the contrary. 200 newspapers have closed, hundreds of, as the Shadow Minister for Communications pointed out, hundreds of journalists' jobs lost, 21 local government areas, 21, without coverage from a single local newspaper, print or online. Media diversity in regional and remote areas already low, at or below the minimum number of voices in 68% of licensed areas. The government recently admitted signs of market failure in regional commercial television broadcasting, and we've had regional media organisations launching campaigns begotten by years of government inaction and neglect, as indicated by the Shadow Minister for Communications. So the ACCC hasn't stepped in to deal with concentration. They've certainly never stepped in to help small business get a better deal out of the big media players on advertising. Okay? We've talked a lot about advertising in this debate and the impact on media. When's the ACCC ever stood in for the small players? They can, in regional markets, absolutely get onto regional TV networks or in regional papers, not in the cities, because they're squeezed out. And they're either squeezed out through a combination of sweetheart deals or the way that the pricing goes drives it so high a small business can't get in. Never seen the ACCC deal with that, ever, ever. And we've never seen the government do it. And does anyone, as I say, really believe that the government did this for anything other than big interests in the media? As much as we talk about big tech, let's talk about big media. And the government, this Conservative government, did not do this process on behalf of The Guardian or New Daily or the Schwartz media in terms of the Saturday paper or ACN. They never did it for them, ever. Let's say it. They did it for the bigger interests in media. They did it for the News Corps, they did it for the Fairfaxes, they did it for the big commercial free-to-airs. That's what they did it for. And so I absolutely support that journalists should get paid for their content. Totally. I totally do. But in many instances, these jokers, the government, they wouldn't know what they're talking about. Most of the content that you see, if it is on a subscription basis, you'll either get, in some cases, a limited number of free views or you'll hit a paywall. You know, and I remember pleading with News Corp when they operated local newspapers in my area, please do not put local papers behind a paywall, because the local community never paid for those papers, right? I mean, they were delivered less to homes, but they didn't pay for them. You put up a paywall, you're never going to see local information, right? But they put everything behind a paywall, so you were paid for content, right? Or you had a limited number of views and then you had to get a subscription. What we are talking about here is the two-way value proposition, and Google, as a big search engine, does absolutely get commercial benefit when their search queries lob up, in response to one of your queries, a reputable newspaper, right, as an answer to your search query, right? They absolutely get commercial value, but so does the newspaper. So does the media outlet, if they are prioritised because of their reputation in the outcome of that. So the two-way value proposition is what it's all about. Unfortunately, in terms of news, Google News Showcase, which for many people who may be unaware of what it looks like, it effectively looks like, Google will hate me saying this, but it looks like Apple News, right? And it's the curation, and the news outlets will get paid the licensing fees and the curation costs. It's a good deal for the news outlets and it's a good deal for Google. And it's also a good deal for all of them to sidestep the complexity, the complex horror of this code that would have been a legal nightmare, and it is in their interest from the media perspective to sidestep all those costs, and it's also in the interest of Google not to have to go through that. And I might just because my good friend, the member for Lyons, raised this, who I've known for many years, and I do respect a lot of the things that you've raised, but I think it's important to say this. In terms of advertising, consulting from Alpha Beta showed that between 2002, this is Richard Holden, who is the Professor of Economics of UNSW Business School, and don't think he's some sort of Labor-friendly person. He's stuck it to us and them, so he's pretty impartial. He said, consulting firm Alpha Beta showed that between 2002 and 2008, newspaper revenue fell from $4.4 billion a year to $3 billion. It's a big decline. And in the Fin Review, this is Richard Holden's comments, the overwhelming majority of this came from the loss of classified advertising, which fell from $1.5 billion in 2002 to $200 million in 2018. Did the revenue go to the tech companies? No. They went to the online plays, right? And bear in mind too, we're not there's not much acknowledgement by the media companies that they shunted off a lot of their classified advertising into realestate.com or domain.com.au. That they made those decisions. They make the decisions as to which audiences they chase and how big that audience will be and whether or not it'll sustain them. They make it. They have, and as Holden says, the bottom line is that newspapers used to have their own monopoly on classified advertising, and a technological innovation, the internet, destroyed that monopoly. But the big tech companies were not the winners because it didn't all flow to the Googles and Facebooks. It went elsewhere. That's the big thing that needs to be recognised. So there's a lot that has been in there. But here's the thing. Out of all this effort and all this money that's being sloshed around right now, we're told in 1 year's time it's going to be reviewed. Yeah, right. I'm sure that the government, going into an election year, is going to do a review on this that's contrary to the media. I'm sure that's going to happen. But what I want to be certain about, it's not, by the way, but what I absolutely want to be certain about is this. Does this code lead to more journalists? Does this code lead to better paid journalists, so we've got quality coming in, or are we holding on to quality in there? And will it just mean that there is a transfer of wealth out of the tech firms to the shareholders and we never see the benefit out of it? Because if that's what happens, then this whole process is a joke. If we do not see more journalism, more independent outlets, more avenues, more diversity, more strengthening of the role of media in this democracy, and it's all gone to shareholders, this process has been an utter joke and should be called out if that happens. I mean, I don't think we're going to find that out in a year's time, because this government is, judging by their performance on this, they were so slow to bring this to the table. I doubt very much they're going to bring that in. But I tell you what, there are some of us that are watching, and we will see if this genuinely leads to better and more journalism. And I am all in favour of that, and I am all in favour of those revenues going for that, but I'm not in favour of a transfer of wealth.
The member's time has expired.